In December 2019, we began a monumental task, one that had not been undertaken for over 70 years, standing up a new military service. Our Guardians have done a lot already in nearly 4 years, and 2023 was a banner year for many of these efforts. But we're not done yet. We have more units being activated, more missions coming online, more personnel interested in being part of the Space Force than ever before. We have the most talented workforce, the most technologically advanced and innovative service on the face of the Earth, and we are going to continue to forge a purpose-built Space Force, laser-focused on securing our nation's interests in, from, and to space. So get ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. My name is Matt Anderson, Chief Growth Officer at the Space Force Association. And today we continue our Space Warfighter talks with the Commander of Space Delta 6, Colonel Col Kennedy. Sir, thanks for joining us today.
Matt, truly glad to be here with you and see you again.
Yeah, it's been almost 2 years since you took command of Space Delta 6, and boy, has the world changed. And we're going to dive into a lot of that. We're going to get into the mission, let you brag about your people a little bit. But before we do, we want to talk about, peel the onion back on yourself and your own, being a Delta commander, there's only been a few of them in the history of the Space Force. So we want to just talk about the history, what got you here, and it's graduation season. So we've got a lot of ROTC cadets graduating. We've got high school students graduating, thinking about careers in the military. Can you reach back into your brain and say, hey, when I was 18 years old and I was thinking about options in life, what were you thinking about?
That's a great question and an awesome time of year to think, what was I doing around this time in roughly 1997? So just graduated from high school, headed to Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. I would walk on to the ROTC program there, get a scholarship for sophomore, junior, senior year, initially be a communications officer in the Air Force, and then a realm of assignments over time. One of my most cyber assignments was at NSA as a first lieutenant. Learned a ton there. Then some air operations stuff at Andrews, and then U.S. Central Command doing, exec comm support for a number of generals down there. In terms of space specific, around 2014, I got hired to be the Space Comm Squadron Commander at Buckley. What was unique about that timing was command cyber readiness inspections were kind of a make or break for certain people and a big deal towards doing the right cybersecurity things on the mission. And then Colonel Burt saw that in my record, and I believe they needed me to come help work that effort. So that's what kind of got me into working with different space missions, and particularly space-based infrared system on Buckley. Another thing that happened during that assignment is I was exposed to the 50th Network Operations Group. And I thought, hey, if I get to grow up to be a colonel, I would love to go do that. Now, some things happened in terms of that joining the Space Force. And to reach my goal, not only did I want to go back and employ some of the knowledge I have about space operations and specifically cyber defense of the systems, but the unit that I wanted to command joined the Space Force, along with a lot of other great people that I want to work with again. So that's what got me. I did join the Space Force and then matched to command and got to reach my goal, which was commanding this unit. So that's other details germane to that question, but that's essentially how I got here. And it's been a great journey the whole way, and I've loved doing it.
Yeah, and knowing Lieutenant General Burt, I'm sure when she looked at your record, she saw also value in that deployed time that you had.
Sure.
You had some deployed time, and that's one of the things that SFA is, working with the Space Force to provide those types of opportunities for Guardians so that they can be someone like yourself. Or if you look at General Rock Miller, and General Saltzman being a deputy CFAC, and those types of jobs are really important for Guardians to have as well. Can you give us just a little snippet about your deployed time?
Sure. So I was the comm officer for General Odierno when he was the commander in Baghdad there at U.S. Forces Iraq. And then after he finished his time there, I went and I worked in the engineering section of J6. So looking at specific systems we were employing throughout the theater there. Got to learn a ton and meet some great people I'm still in touch with. But I do worry that we don't always recognize how great deployment experience is for our folks. One of my units considered reclaiming someone, and I said, no, they got to go get this experience. I said, especially for a captain, where we can get exposure to how our efforts align to joint operations, especially as a CGO or young NCO, that's pivotal to future efforts and how we're going to do things later.
Yeah, it's incredible when you get to spend time with soldiers, airmen, sailors, Marines, and you get to understand their mission and they understand yours. I think as you rise up the ranks as you have, you understand why these missions are so important to the Joint Force, especially when you think of the big Space Force. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Let's get a little bit more detail into your home in Delta 6. Let's talk about cyber defense versus cyber security. There's a lot of buzzwords that get thrown around in this community, but you're sitting right in the thick of it in Delta 6. And
Sure.
I think it's awesome that as we look at the new Air Force Academy class that's about to graduate with 97 cadets becoming Space Force lieutenants,
Great.
and then all of them coming out of ROTC. Cyber is one of the career fields that is huge for these new lieutenants, and it's near and dear to your heart, Delta 6. Can you talk about the cybersecurity, cyber defense, and what it means in Delta 6?
Sure. So in terms of cybersecurity, those efforts are typically led by sustainment functions of our weapon systems, but the other deltas can definitely advocate via their information system security managers, for things like patching vulnerabilities or modernizing equipment. And I describe cybersecurity as all the things that if you want your system to be secure, you should do and you should do. Mm-hmm. So not a lot of surprises that you should have multi-factor authentication on passwords or frequently scrub your admins to make sure the people that left a month ago or a week ago don't have access. And then there's been a lot of things DoD-wide in terms of zero trust initiatives and we continue to learn from not only across the DoD but also the intelligence community. And then we have great relationships with industry to pick up what they're doing and see how they're looking at it. So cybersecurity, the things we know we should do, right? Whereas cyber defense at that point is where we're looking for specific things, specific actors or specific things that are dangerous to our weapon systems. And how do we narrow down on those things? And how do we censor and equip our systems to help us realize what's going on? And that's essentially what we've trained about 400 to 500 Guardians across our different cyber squadrons to really look for and zero in on.
That's huge. If I think about my own personal computer, cybersecurity, it's what I should be doing with my computer.
Absolutely.
And as I help my mom out with her computer, it's what she should be doing. Cyber defense, we're talking nefarious actors. We're talking about perhaps they're trying to find those weak links in the chain where, there's been a lot of press recently about Russia potentially putting a nuclear weapon in space and the kinetic kill vehicles, and those get a lot of hype. However, it's been years now, General Whiting's been talking about that soft underbelly, which is cyber. And if an adversary could attack the soft underbelly, maybe they can get the same result, but without a kinetic effect. And I think that's where that cyber defense is huge there. Is that about right from what your perspective?
Absolutely. I think that we've had a lot of great opportunities to expand on DCO. The service has made great investments on it, not only in terms of billets and people, but also the training, which we've worked not only internal to Delta 6, but also with 16th Air Force and then STARCOM. But it's been a great opportunity for our folks to really learn and push their skills. And we've seen some great results in what they're able to figure out and how innovative they are.
Now, Delta 6 is not unique in the Space Force, but it is unique compared to maybe a sister squadron in the Air Force. If you think about a legacy fighter squadron where everybody's in one geographic location and everybody does one mission, I wanted you to expand a little bit about on Delta 6. I know it's grown in the last couple of years, geographically separated units, very different squadrons with two kind of big missions. Can you give us a big picture on the current state of Del 6?
Sure. So on the we talked a little bit much on the cyber side of the mission, but in terms of space access or how we contact spacecraft via a number of ground stations, we have an SCN ground station about roughly every 60 degrees encircling the globe. So that's allows us to contact and do certain C2 functions with a number of spacecraft, and that's a mission that we're very busy doing that just as well as we are on the cyber side. In terms of cyber operations, we currently have 6 cyber squadrons, and they are prioritized on different deltas they're aligned to. and some system priority goes into that. So what we think the most essential things are to defend, we typically have applied force in that manner.
No, that's huge. And when you have all these geographic separated commanders from yourself out at Schriever, it's going to take a certain unique culture. And I've actually talked to a lot of folks in your Delta that brag about the culture you've created over the past 2 years. Can you tell us the importance of culture, what you've tried to do in Del 6, and how it's going?
Sure. So, I definitely want it to be a place where people want to come work and realize that they're listened to and empowered to achieve, what they think the best thing is for the unit and the overall mission. So we've been able to recruit and retain a lot of folks, especially on the enlisted and guardian side that want to do the mission and are excited. And then as we've improved training over time, we've seen their willingness and motivation increase. So I'm glad that's helped some of them stay, though some will probably return to us later, we'll say. And then on the civilian side, specifically, folks on my staff that came out of industry, I won't name specific companies, but between industry and the IC, we're able to make sure that we get expertise and pretty senior folks that can really help us solve tough problems in a much more rapid manner.
Yeah, that's huge. And the culture, like I said, a lot of your folks were bragging about you, and I see that patch on your arm right there. You're the NCO. Can you show that to our group real quick and talk to about it a little bit? Absolutely.
So this is a Space Operations Command campaign this year to recognize the invaluable contributions of our non-commissioned officers. And I see in terms of the great work they're able to do, in operations, on our crews, on our floors. And I think it's a great thing about the U.S. military that we recruit and then train and help empower these personnel to do our missions. Seeing a lot of amazing work, and I'm glad we're taking the time this year to really recognize them and their contributions.
Yeah, I think it's a game changer when you look at our adversaries. The Secretary will talk about China and Russia specifically a lot, but the NCO Corps that we have, and especially that senior NCO Corps that is empowered, I think of people like Chief Master Sergeant Ron Lurch out at Space Systems Command, an Intel NCO who is empowered to go around the world and talk about, in an unclassed way, the threat that we're facing in the Space Force right now. It's just really impressive. You talked about partnerships, and you talked about the IC, and you talked about a little bit of industry, but that partnership is key in Delta 6, not just for the space access mission, but also for the cyber defense mission. Can you talk about the partnerships that are important to you as the commander of Del 6?
Sure. So I have a great S5 that looks at our engagement strategy with our different partners to make sure we're applying our clock cycles and time to the best benefit of the mission. I won't call out specific companies, but the main idea is that we don't rest on our laurels and we look at who is doing, whether it's space access or cyber defense, who is doing this best across the DoD and IC, and what can we learn from them. We also go out to industry. We spent time in an industry security operations center to see how their operations have changed over the past few years. And something that we learned was how much more they're devoting towards industrial control systems and how vulnerable that is for our companies in America. They really saw a large increase in their share of business going towards that. What's happening in corporate America is sometimes there's ransomware against those key industrial control systems. And that, so they've had to basically look at how do they defend those things in their commercial operations. We have efforts also to secure our industrial control systems, specifically that affect our bases and a number of pilots and things we're testing that'll help us have confidence in those systems and know what a nominal day looks like and know when anything abnormal happens.
Yeah, one of your peers we recently chatted with, the commander of Space Base Delta 1, whose job is, he talks about the mission Delta commanders, like I have to support them, and that in a reciprocal manner, you're supporting him as well. But that partnership, I think, is unique, and we want to continue to beat that drum in SFA to say, look, the infrastructure on these space-based Delta 1 and the bases themselves, they are just like an aircraft carrier. They are a weapon system. And I know, can you talk about how critical that is to your mission?
Absolutely. So in terms of, power, HVAC, security, access control systems, water, sewage even, all of those things could be something as simple as the power being out at the Child Development Center.
Right. How
are our crews going to show up when the place is too cold to drop off their kids? So I never look at when we have instances like that it's an accident. In this this time and age, I look at what's going on and where do we need to improve our defense and get better data on what's happening.
Yeah, it's a great partnership with the Space Base Delta 1 and the Mission Deltas. And completely shifting gears, though, but I think it applies to your role at Delta 6. There's a lot of talk about big data in the world. Everybody talks about big data. Everybody talks about AI, ML, and how to use that with data. From your perspective, what do you thought on big data?
I'm seeing a number of chief data officers and data engineers, and essentially they're helping us look at the right data to know what's going on inside our weapon systems and be more effective at it. So I think that over time, we need more folks that are trained in those capabilities and ways of doing business, and then we need to increase some of the staff's, not only Space Operations Command, and there are folks that are doing, data efforts, but then also across all the different deltas. If we look in industry at the rate of, AI and data engineering and things, they're solving this a lot quicker, and we have to pick up from them how it's going.
So data engineering, data science as well, is that another one you look at?
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you think about the whole talk of the Space Force with the IMDs coming on board, Lieutenant General Garant recently just said, hey, the goal is to get them all into IMDs. And it's been, approaching a year. There'll be a year this fall when the first IMDs were brought on board. What do you think the future or potential would be? What are the pros and cons maybe with Delta 6? And do you think that would be something that would be beneficial?
Absolutely. So we're definitely paying attention to the PNT provisional Delta in terms of an IMD, and then also Delta 3 in what they're seeing. So for our mission, I think that, if we look at IMD combining the operations and the sustainment functions and putting them, next to each other and working, I think that even though we have great, in-person meetings and phone and great, it's a highly communicative era in terms of everything we can do to keep in touch with others. There's nothing like putting folks left seat, right seat in terms of what they're able to do. So I think we're seeing putting the ops and sustainment functions next to each other just helps them solve problems and do the mission more effectively. I think that would be exactly the case of Delta 6. Though we do have good relationships with our various sustainment functions, I think that it's also an element of the difference between, asking folks to do something and specifically, tasking.
Right.
That's a key change that I think. I think for the other way I look at it is prioritization of efforts, especially towards cybersecurity or defense or sustainment. The Delta commanders have to prioritize all of that in terms of, whereas now it's someone else's to prioritize or to meet their requirements on. So I think that that's a huge opportunity to not that I want to put more on their plate. They absolutely have enough, but I think it's a little bit more personal when it's totally theirs.
Yeah, there's been other career fields and other services that have tried similar efforts, and they seem to have come and they've gone. Whether the Army has tried it, the Air Force has tried it with ops and maintenance and different things like that. But this is one that I think Scott, definitely has the attention of General Saltzman, and we look forward to seeing how that one goes. You mentioned left and right seat, and you've mentioned training a few times, and I see a little smile. You're clearly proud of the training that's going on in Delta 6, and I agree with you. Good training, realistic training where folks can say, hey, this is what we're actually going to have to do in a wartime scenario. It helps recruit, it helps retain. People want to be part of teams like that. Can you talk about some of the training that's going on at Delta 6 and just say, hey, this is what we've done and I'm really proud of it?
Sure. So we have basically initial skills training, then initial qualification training, and we're looking across the rest of the DoD at what standards and what levels they train folks to, and then we set those knowledge, skills, and attributes aligned to what we're training our folks on. Over the past really 10 months, we've cycled through 300 to 400 folks in terms of our different training, training courses and curriculum, and then we've evaluated how well they learned things, and then what we've started to see is that the cases that they're able to figure out on the different weapon systems show how well the training's working. And it shows a lot about them, but not also that we got the training right. or at least as right as we can for where we are in maturity. Now, we're not. We realize how long it takes to train personnel, and not only that, but the experience they get. So, especially, NCOs at 12 to 15 years that have been working cyber protection team missions and different offensive efforts. We can still learn a lot from them. We do have a bit of a junior force, so we have some folks that are more senior. And it will at the same time take time to just get folks the reps and sets and crew time to really be, the top end of doing this.
Yeah, it's on the cyber mission that those 10 to 15 year NCOs that have seen it and as they depart service, how do you get the reps and sets for the younger Guardians coming up? I think that's huge, and that validated training is big. Is there a similar model on the space access side with the satellite control network? That thing's been around since 1958, and there's been a lot of efforts going into to modernize, which is fantastic. How about the training on that side? Are we seeing changes there as well as it modernizes?
So a lot of our operations are contracted out on the satellite control network, but in terms of scheduling, that is largely government, and then there are military crew commanders and crews that run the SCN, especially I'll say in resource constrained or times when we're having to choose what we execute contacts on. So a little bit different. That's been more established in terms of what we train those folks on. But if we look at SPA 4 Gen and what it's endeavoring to integrated training with space, cyber, and intel, and how much that is done inside of mission planning and the whole planning, prepare, executing, and debrief. That's where we're trying to make sure that everyone's learning from their counterparts and getting as good at what we do, and not only that, integrating all the effects towards each mission that we're endeavoring to accomplish.
Yeah, that debrief culture and getting back to culture within your Delta, I've been told that is a fantastic culture you've established as well. Hey, we debrief, we learn, we move on, and we get better the next day. And the more we do that, the more the adversary is sweating in their boots, and that's I think it shores up the defense that we need. Before we end up, I want to give you an opportunity to think to the future a little bit. Crystal ball, maybe. Think about space access, cyber defense 5 years from now. So what will your successors be thinking about? What are some of the challenges that they're going to have now that you've been in the seat almost 2 years?
Sure. So on the space access side, I think there's a lot of opportunities to do more remote operations, more antennas, some more redundancy, and things that we're working on there that will allow us to just have more capacity overall. Mm-hmm. Putting more spacecraft in space requires that. So I think we're on path for that to be a reality in the next 5 years. I think that some of the infrastructure costs we have, running all of these ground stations in some cases has a lot of different functions and sustainment requirements that are expensive. So there's probably some opportunity to either go on other military sites nearby or do remote operations or do at least less in terms of staffing 24/7. On the cyber defense side, I think that I can't wait to see what our force is doing 5 years from now. I think that their rate of improvement and learning is just awe-inspiring and impressive. Some of our capabilities, I think that we would have more automation that allows them to work higher levels of difficulty and more challenging problems or more serious things. I think the overall cybersecurity across our Space Force will continue to improve as more folks realize the pivotal nature it is to have secure systems. I think we're helping to. I think SPA 4 Gen in terms of the integrated training with both space operators and our intel operators helps folks understand that and advocate for it. So I think that we'll have a lot more effectiveness overall just operationally by the time 5 years goes by. But truly excited to see what they're doing. Hope I'm can come back to see it. and see some of the things we put in place now really mature.
So, sir, there's continuous education that SFA does, not only within the Space Force. It's about 4.5 years old right now, but Space Command for a number of years has been in the press. So we continue to talk about the difference between combatant commands, geographic combatant commands, the military services themselves, Space Force specifically, and we want people to continue to learn, hey, when I think Delta 6, I want to think cyber defense, I want to think space access, and these things may change over time as roles and missions change, but without a doubt, the cyber defense, cyber security, that mission in itself gets confusing to the average layperson, even in the halls of Congress, because there's a lot of DoD entities that work in the cyber world. Can you explain that a little bit, big picture, and then work it all the way down to Delta 6 and what you're focused on?
So there's specific authorities that flow through from Cybercom, the Joint Force headquarters for cyber, which the Space Force doesn't have one yet. Mm-hmm. So until that time, we do fall under the Air Force. So if it were, say, a named operation going on that had directive tasks, it would flow through that chain for distribution and things like that. A key difference, though, is that our cyber squadrons are aligned to the deltas they support and the needs of that delta in terms of the cyber defense of that mission. So it's not that they wouldn't get a task. If they did get a task, it would probably be through Space Force's space that the delta they support is aligned to. So in terms of, we can get orders down through from Spacecom. We could get them through Cybercom, depending on what it is, or things from Cybercom through 16th Air Force. Bottom line, a lot of folks could send us orders based on how we're aligned. But I think that we've tried to protect as a service is the equities of our cyber squadrons to be solely focused on the defense of the deltas that they support.
Yeah, no different than at the 06 level with yourself and Space Base Delta 1. Having a Space Base Delta 1 commander allows you to focus on your mission, and that is huge. Right. It allows your operators, your cyber defense men and women, to focus on the delta that they're assigned to, and I think that allows them to get really good at what they do and not be a peanut butter spread all the way across. But I really wanted to thank you for your time today, and I know you're slowly closing out a command tour here, and just wanted to give you one last opportunity to say last parting thoughts on Delta 6, the men and women of Delta 6, or even just the mission of cyber defense as well as space access.
Great, Matt. Yeah, and great to see you again, and thanks for having me and talking with me about Delta 6 today. So things I think about, kind of in the last few months being a Delta commander, we've been able to really recruit and retain some outstanding talent. Not only how we train the military, and some of them have, those that have stayed and do multiple tours with us. On the officer side, our civilians, some great folks went to industry and came back because they love the mission and what we do. And we provide enough of a positive, Delta culture where they want to come work with us. And then the other thing I look at is progress. We are really problem focused on solving certain things, and sometimes that makes it harder to look at the progress that we've made, which we get feedback from folks that visited us a year or two ago, and kind of the reflections from them when they say, hey, I'm seeing all these different things. You guys are doing better. And the thing I look for on maturity is certain, we have kind of a case management system if something's concerning on some of our networks. And for me, it's seeing what our guardians and civilians are able to figure out that shows me their maturity, but then also what the systems are able to tell us. So that's this type of things. On the space access mission, it's something that, still 400 to 500 contacts a day on the SCN, something that's really important, and it does some unique things that commercial contacts don't necessarily do. Yeah. The amount of power it can use inside of anomalies, the locations we have, the spectrum that we have in those places. So as we work to improve that and modernize that weapon system, I don't want to lose the unique, kind of unique selling benefits of what that system does, because it is even though you harken back to 1958 in terms of the timeline, there's some really special things it does that are immense value to the service, and that we have to keep improving upon and looking forward with.
Yeah, no doubt. That mission has grown exponentially and will continue to grow as our adversaries figure out ways to chip away at us. And I know you're leading that charge. And just want to thank you for your time again today. What an important mission. Thank you for awesome culture that you've established in Delta 6. It shows. We saw it at Space Power Conference 23. Look forward to seeing Delta 6 there in Space Power Conference 24.
Great.
And sir, thanks again for your time.
Yeah, Matt,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
so much.
Super.
Appreciate it.